Alright guys, welcome to part 8, where we actually take a look at creating the blog page. This page will render any blogs that you've posted and give you the full view, not just a headline. We're going to make sure to add a couple extra features, like if this blog is owned by you, maybe an option to delete it or to go edit it. And other than that, we're just going to make it show up like we did for the preview by setting the HTML like we did that way, and everything should work smoothly. So without further ado, let's get into the video. So what I'm going to do to start off is I'm going to copy and paste all of these state variables and the use effect here, and I'm going to paste them into my blog.tsx file. The first thing I'm going to do at the top is I'm going to add the root component props to the chevrons for our React function component, just so we can access the match params here. And then I'm going to start removing some of these state variables. And all I want to be left with in the end is my ID loading an error. And then I'm going to add all my missing imports here. I'm just going to do it through Visual Studio Code. Inside of my use effect, get rid of these things inside of the if else. And then I think I can start adding some state variables here. I'm going to add a blog and a set blog. And this is going to be a use state that is either going to be an iBlog or null. And the reason that I'm doing this is because if this is null, I don't want to render anything. I'm going to copy and paste the loading state variable twice, change one to modal and set modal. This is going to be for a pop-up. And the second state variable is going to be deleting and set deleting. And inside of the modal, we're going to ask if you actually want to delete your own blog post, and that's also going to be false. I'm going to add a history object like I did in the previous videos by using React Router DOM's history. You can see here it automatically imports from React Router. That should work just fine too, but always try and remember to change that to React Router DOM, and I have changed that inside of the GitHub. Inside of the use effect, we're going to set the blog ID like we've been doing before. And in the else block, we're going to do a history.push to the main page. And the reason that we're doing this is if the ID isn't passed in, we can't actually retrieve anything, so we're just going to boot them off this page. This page does require an ID, so we can actually get it from the back end. So next, I'm going to go back to my edit file, and I'm going to go ahead and copy and paste the getBlog async call. And I'm going to paste that in underneath my use effect, and then I'm going to start editing it. So I'm going to get rid of everything inside of this else block here. In fact, I'm going to get rid of everything inside of the response. I'm going to right click and import the config, and I'm going to import Axios as well. So where it says blogs read ID, I'm actually going to change that to _ID, and I'm going to get rid of the ID inside of the function call, and I'm going to assign this ID a little bit differently in this file. So I'm actually going to add another use effect here. And inside of this use effect, I'm going to check to see if our _ID is not equal to an empty string. And if that's the case, I'm going to call the getBlog function. So the getBlog function won't actually have to be passed anything. It will just use the state variable _ID. I'm going to add the _ID variable as a dependency in the dependency array. So anytime this ID changes, it will load a new blog for you. And then I'm going to copy and paste that ESLint disable next line in front of the dependency array, just so I don't get any errors in the console regarding not passing in my getBlog. Inside of my response, I'm going to set the blog to the response.data.blog. And since the set loading is already in the finally, this function, the way it is right now, is exactly the way it needs to be. So this is all good. I'm going to copy and paste my getBlog function and create a new function called deleteBlog. And this will be called from the modal if you are the owner of the blog. I'm going to set deleting to true at the top. I'm going to change my method to delete. I'm going to get rid of the read as we only have to pass in the ID. Change the response status to simply a 201. If it's successfully deleted, we're going to push them back to the index page. We're going to get rid of that finally block. We're going to set deleting to false in the catch error. And I'm going to copy and paste that and put this in the else block as well. After the deleteBlog function, you're going to do an if loading and then return the loading component like we've been doing. Inside of this, you can just put some loading text, or you can put an emoji, anything you want. Now, instead of doing a straight return, we're going to check to see if blog, which means that we're checking to see if it's null or not. If the blog ends up being null after the loading is completed, we're just going to use React Router's redirect to the index page. So you can just go ahead and import that. It automatically did it for me because I'm in Visual Studio Code. And if we do have a blog, this is where we're going to have our actual return. So let's set this up by using a React Strap container. We're going to make it fluid, and we're going to give it a class name like we've been doing in the other files with some padding spacing equal to 0. We're going to add in our navigation as we've been doing. Before we actually pass in our header, let's actually put in our modal. So this won't be viewed unless our isOpen here is equal to the modal, which is going to be set to true when it's open. Pass in a modal header. Inside of that, we're just going to say something like delete. Then we're going to pass in a modal body. A modal is going to look very similar to a card. Inside of it, we're going to say something like, are you sure you want to delete? Or some sort of message like that. But before we do that, we're going to check to see if we're deleting or not. If we are deleting, we're just going to have our loading spinner, so just the loading from the loading component file. And then if we're not deleting yet, then you can put in that text we just mentioned. You can even get crafty and pass in the blog title there if you want, saying like, are you sure you want to delete, and then the blog title. After this, let's go ahead and put some error text and pass in our error. So if there's anything wrong with the deleting, we'll get it inside of the modal. And then we'll do a modal footer. And inside of this, we're going to pass in a button. This button is going to be the color called danger, which is going to show up as red because Bootstrap's danger is red in this case. And we're going to have it say delete permanently. Its on click is going to point to our delete blog function. We're going to pass in a second button, and the color of this one is going to be secondary. So it just shows up as, I believe it's a light gray or a dark gray or something like that. And all we're going to do here is set the modal to false. So it's just going to cancel it and close it. And inside the button text, you could just go ahead and put something like cancel or, I don't know, never mind, whatever you want. So again, this modal is going to be for deleting your own blog if you don't want it posted anymore. Now that we're finished with the modal, we can go ahead and pass in our header component. The header is going to have an image property, and this is going to be equal to our blog.picture or undefined. We're going to have a headline equal to our blog.headline. We're going to have a title equal to our blog.title. And inside of the header component, pass in a paragraph with a class name with the text white. And simply say something like posted by. And then here we can put the blog.author as an IE user and then get the name property off of that. And then you can put on, and then you can pass in the date. And the date is going to be the blog.created at to locale string. It's always going to be created at because it can be updated at any time, but we just want to know when it was originally posted for now. After the header, create a container with the class name that has the margin top of 5. Inside of that, you can check to see if our user ID is equal to the blog.author as an IUser ._ID, which means that if this is our blog, then what we're going to want is our buttons to show up to maybe open that modal. So let's create a container inside of this little statement. We're going to make it fluid and give it a class name also that has padding 0. So it's going to go right to the edges for us. And we could pass in first a button. And this button is going to have the color of info, which is going to be blue. And the class name is going to be MR2, which means a margin right of 2. We're going to add a tag with React Router DOM's link. And this is going to go to the edit/blog._ID page. So this is going to load up the content for you inside of the page like it did in the last video. And inside this button, you can copy and paste in some font awesome if you want. I like to use the little save button or maybe the little pencil or something to edit it. So let's do the FA edit and then add some edit text. So let's add one more button to this. And on the inside of it, I'm going to pass in the trash alt from Font Awesome. And this is going to give us the garbage can icon. This is going to have a color of danger. It's going to have an on click that is going to set the modal to true, so the modal pops up. It's going to have delete inside of the button text, and that should be all for our buttons. Next, you can pass in the error text again. We're going to have this here just in case there's any problems loading the blog. Then we can throw a div. We can dangerously set the inner HTML to the underscore HTML property using the blog.content. We did this in the last video for the preview when we edited the blog. At the bottom, you can export the default with router and import that with router from React Router DOM. So here I actually have both React Router and React Router DOM imported. So I'm just going to copy all this stuff and throw it into React Router DOM because it just imports from React Router sometimes by accident. Next, I'm going to go to my edit page and make sure that says React Router DOM as well. We just want to make sure that everything is the same across all of our pages. So let's just merge it in with the link down here. Go ahead and save that. Now I'm going to spin up my project and let's take a look to see what happens. So let's go ahead and click this blog post. And you can see that it says the some cool content from last page and the edit and delete buttons show up because I'm the user who created these blogs. Let's go back here and maybe give this a little bit of space because that was a little bit too close just for the eyes. And let's just add an HR underneath these buttons just to give it a little separation. And when you go back to the page, then now you can see this is separated for the people who do have these options. So if I click this delete permanently, we can see that I get a little error here. So what's going on with this? First, when we take a look at our delete blog function, we should change this error text to say unable to delete blog, not retrieve blog, and save that. And then we have to figure out what exactly is causing the error for us not to be able to delete this blog. So more than likely it was the response.status. So let's change that to 200 as when we delete it, I believe I had it set to 200 in the backend. And we're going to refresh this page. We're going to see that we're authenticated. And you'll notice that when we came back to the index, the blog actually is gone. So let's go ahead and just post a blog again and then see if we can delete it and have the UI respond properly. So we're going to post a quick blog here. I'm going to click post. I'm going to view the blog post. You can see in the blog post the title and the headline and the username all show up nicely. So I'm going to click the delete button, click delete permanently, and you'll see that the blog post has disappeared. So let's just make a final couple edits here just so we can see what's going on. What we're going to do is we're going to go back to the code. And I'm going to go back to the delete blog function, and I'm going to set a timeout of 1000 milliseconds or 1 second like we've been doing for all of the other loading, just so you can see these loading times exaggerated so it doesn't just pop through the screen really, really fast. I want you to actually grasp what's happening. So let's set a timeout of 1000 here and then do the history push. And with all that being said, now I think it's time that we can actually test out all the functionality of this blog. Let's go through everything and make sure all of it is working properly together. So let's save it with a history push. Let's post the blog. And I'm going to give it a title of, "This is a cool blog." I'm going to put in a little headline here like, "I'm excited to share this with you," or whatever you guys want. You don't actually have to waste too much time on this. And then just throw some text in the content like, "Hey guys, check out my cool YouTube channel," or something like that. Now I'm going to hit post. You're going to see that the blog was posted and I'm going to view it. But I'm actually going to go to the index just to make sure it's showing up properly. So you can see that it says, "This is a cool blog. I'm excited to share this with you." You'll see both the buttons. I click edit. And when I click edit and come back here, I'm just going to add a little bit more to the content. And when I save it and go back to the index, it should say the blog was updated at instead of created at this time. So let's view the blog post. That looks good. Now let's go back to the index. And you can see that it says it was now updated instead of created at. So that's working perfectly fine. Let's create a second blog post. And we're going to use this blog post to test the sorting algorithm just to make sure that the last blog that was updated is brought to the top. And when I go back after I save it, you can see that the second blog is posted above. So let's go to the first one. Let's edit it. Let's just add a couple periods or something. We're going to update it and then go back to the index. And then you can see that the cool blog was updated to the front of the list. So the sorting is working and the most recently updated blogs are going to be bumped up to the top. That's the functionality we put in purpose, so that's working just fine. So I'm going to log out and go to the blog index. And I actually can't go to the blog index. It looks like I might have protected it with auth by accident. So it's a good thing we're testing. Let's go back to the route.ts file and config and just make sure our root path has the auth set to false. And you can see here I have it set to true. So let's just set that to false because even if you're not logged in, you should be able to read a blog post still. And now if I go to the index, now I can see the blogs. And when I go into it, you can see that I can't see the edit or delete buttons because I don't own the blog. So if I sign back in, I should be able to see those edit and delete buttons now. And looks like they're working perfectly. When I hit delete permanently, you can see that the modal exaggerates. So I'm going to get rid of that blog. And actually, let's go back one more time. And I'm going to exaggerate the loading for the get blog. So the finally set loading, I'm going to set a timeout there of 1,000 as well, just so you can see the blog load a little bit slower. So let's throw that set loading inside of this timeout. And now when I refresh, you can see that it's loading the blogs. And when I click the blog, you can see that the blog takes a second to load. So I'm going to delete this. And there are no blogs anymore because I've deleted them all. So last but not least, I'm going to test to make sure that I can add a custom photo. So I'm going to go to this stock photo website and just pick something random. Maybe I'm going to search for maybe like a blog post or something like that. You could pick anything you want. This photo of this lady typing on a laptop looks great. So I'm just going to copy the image location, make sure that I can see the image. And then I'm going to post the blog one more time. And I'm going to make sure to add the picture URL. So it's going to try and load the picture for me. So that banner you see behind the create a blog at the top, that default banner that we created in the previous video, should get replaced by this picture that I just put in. So let's post it and view the blog post. And you can see that the picture is put in the background. Now it's going to be offset a little bit, obviously. So any pictures you want to use for a banner should be, of a similar size to that. But that being said, the picture works. And it looks like all of the functionality that we've put into this blog is working just fine. So in conclusion to this video, these 8 or 9 videos together is everything that you need for a basic MERN stack application using TypeScript. I thought a blog would be a good example because it has a little bit of basic functionality and everything that you need. So even though this is the last part of the video, I'd still be down to expand on some other things. For example, verification of your JSON data, let's say on the server side. So if someone tries to send you some bad data, maybe hack the server, how to protect yourself from that. Or another upgrade you could do is learn how to automate the deployment of this. There's so many different ways you could go with this, but I thought that creating this blog application would be a good example and a good basis to start a project for you using Mongo, React, Express, and the TypeScript language itself. And I think it went pretty well. If there's something else you'd guys like to see, please let me know in the comments below. But other than that, I hope you enjoy this blog application, and I hope it was useful to you and you can use it in creating your own React and Express applications. Thank you so much for following this series, and I hope to create a new one for you in the future.